Well, the Wu flu situation got even crazier today. Finally, after a lot of worries over time about potential lockdown in America, something that I've been talking about for quite a while. Something the fears of which have sort of ebbed and flowed for a while there. It looked like after you saw Italy, France, and Spain lock down, it looked like that the U.S. was heading towards a national lockdown itself. You had Trump talking about how he wasn't that concerned about the economy, he just wanted to stop the virus, and then all of a sudden, as the stock market continued to plummet and we started hearing about 30% unemployment and all these things, Trump started backing off. He was saying, hey, we don't want to destroy, we don't want the cure, or we don't want the treatment to be worse than the disease. Literally in this case, we don't want to destroy our entire economy, if even, just to mitigate this virus. Because in his opinion, that would be worse. And again, there's an important point there. There is a balance that you have to match between, trying to snuff out the virus and destroying your economy, because the economy is society. That is civil society. This is, people acting voluntarily with each other and engaging in not only commerce but socialization. But I mean by socialization, I mean like talking to other people, engaging, contact. The opposite of atomization, where people just sort of live their own lives as hunter-gatherers in, prehistory, in the Paleolithic era. And so, if you don't have an economy, you literally don't have society. Humanity will break down. It would be disastrous. So there's some happy medium there in between completely destroying our society and just letting the virus burn and kill millions of people. And so Trump has been vacillating back and forth between these two things. Hey, do we want to just release all restrictions by Easter, like he was talking about not too long ago? Or do we want a national lockdown? I mean, these are two extremes. There has to be somewhere in the middle, and that's what Trump seems to be. And I hinted at this a few days ago that Trump, I think, is moving towards a policy similar to what China did, of having very strict lockdowns in certain areas and then having very loose restrictions in other parts of the country, so that the entire country does not have to shut down, at least not all at once. Because if we can slow the spread in the case that to where this is only flaring up in certain parts of the country at certain times, so that, like, for example, in New York right now, and I'll get to what he said today, in a place like New York, things are really, really bad right now. You're not going to just stop that. Things are going to be bad there for a while, but you don't want things to be that bad in the rest of the country. And so perhaps by locking down New York, you can sort of let things burn there. The infection is still going to start spreading in the rest of the country. Things will continue to get worse, but maybe things won't be as bad in New York by the time that it kicks off in other parts of the country. And so you sort of have you're able to limit things by having these hot spots flare up at different times, by doing your best to contain the really, really bad hot spots so that they don't just immediately spread out across the entire country and accelerate the rate of infection across America. And so the way that you achieve this, short of a national lockdown in which everyone, is sort of confined to their homes, is you confine all the people who will live within these hotspots. And so right now, what Trump is talking about is a total quarantine, Wuhan style, of the tri-state area of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. And this is something that Andrew Cuomo talked about not too long ago. I was just saying that, how it was amazing to see Andrew Cuomo, who was supposed to be this big, powerful governor, begging the military to come in and essentially overthrow his government, to replace the civilian administration with some, martial law military rule, which would take over not only the state of New York, because he said shutting down New York would not be enough. Because Bill de Blasio hinted at the fact that, hey, we could be issuing a shelter-in-place order soon and trying to get people to shut down the whole city. Bill de Blasio, the mayor of New York. And the governor came out later and said, no, Bill, that's wrong. I wouldn't approve that, because shutting down New York City, that's not enough. We have to shut down not just the state of New York, but other states. We have to have a national response to this. We need to have coordination with other states, because if we shut down New York, then that's not going to do anything for these other states. And so Cuomo almost was advocating for, depending on how you want to interpret what he said, at the very least he was advocating for a lockdown of the tri-state area, perhaps more places like Pennsylvania even, and Delaware, I think, in some of his proposals, were included as places that, New York should be working together with, hence should be quarantined with. And on, you can interpret his also interpret what he was saying as, supporting a national lockdown and saying that Trump, should really take leadership and not have 50 states with 50 different policies, but rather have one, centralized state with one policy of locking down the entire country. And so Trump seems to be moving in the direction of what, at least to me, I interpreted as Cuomo saying not too long ago, that there should be a lockdown of the tri-state area. And what Trump's intention here is to prevent people in New York from spreading out in the rest of the country and sort of planting the seeds and creating new hot spots all over the country because people are trying to flee New York to get away from the virus, whereas a lot of the people who are fleeing are going to already be infected and just not know it. Specifically, the president talked about Florida. He was saying that Florida is having a big problem with New Yorkers coming there and infecting people, and nobody wants New Yorkers coming to Florida, which was something I really appreciated him saying. And those weren't his exact words, but that was pretty much his point, because I agree, not just for the sake of the virus, but I don't want New Yorkers around. They're annoying. They drive up our housing prices, and a lot of them just aren't very nice. And of course, it doesn't help that they're all, crotchety old people by the time they get down here. I don't think that necessarily everyone in New York is a terrible person, but I mean, when New York is sending their people, they're not sending their best. Now, Florida is not the only the state that's, declaring that they have a bit of a problem with New Yorkers coming there. Rhode Island also is stopping people at the border. They've set up border checkpoints. They've locked things down, and they are screening all New Yorkers. Anyone who's coming in from the state of New York is being quarantined for 2 weeks. And so Trump now seems to be, proposing, hey, instead of quarantining all these New Yorkers in these other states, why not just quarantine them in New York? Because right now New York is the new Wuhan. In the same way that back in January we didn't want to be importing people from Wuhan who were in Wuhan who probably could have been exposed at some point to this virus. We should be taking the same approach now to New York. And of course, I don't really like this whole martial law stuff. I don't want any of this to happen. It's bad. But if I'm looking at this on a relative basis, when this is already moving down the pike, if sacrificing New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, which are not exactly free states to begin with, if we have to give them up to the military, I'm willing to make that sacrifice because I would rather save my own skin. You could say that's selfish. Of course it's selfish, but I don't live there. And so if quarantining them for a little while makes it so that there does later on down the road doesn't have to be a quarantine, where I live, and they're able to just actually contain the virus by testing enough people and isolating all the people who have been exposed, and then, stopping the spread, which, arguably it's too late to do that in Florida already. But needless to say, importing a bunch of sick koofers from New York is not going to help the problem. So how did Governor Cuomo respond to Trump saying this, that Trump, is now adopting, what I thought was Cuomo's idea of locking down the tri-state area? Well, Cuomo is absolutely livid. He's outraged. He says, hey, well, you can't do that. Why? That would be a declaration of war on the states. You'd be completely taking us over. It would be massive federal overreach, and of course, it'd destroy the economy. He says that the stock market would drop like a rock. And he's absolutely right. But the funny thing is that a couple weeks ago, Trump and Cuomo were on opposite sides of this argument. Cuomo was saying we got to lock things down now to stop the spread of this, and Trump was saying, hey, what about the economy? We don't want to do that. And I think that states should be leading their own responses to this, and that I should be leading from behind and assisting the governors with what they need. But ultimately, the governors should be the ones making these decisions. And Cuomo was saying, no, please overthrow me, take away my power. I don't understand why things have changed so much for Cuomo. I understand why they have for Trump, because Trump is just the kind of person who vacillates back and forth between these sorts of things, and he's very indecisive and is heavily influenced by the last person he talked to. So I don't really understand what's changed with Cuomo, other than just the fact that now Trump is for it, so maybe he just thinks he should oppose it because Trump's for it. But I mean, I don't know. Cuomo doesn't come across to me like a Trump derangement syndrome type of person. He's nasty in a different way. I have a little more, I guess, respect for him as a mob boss. I think Cuomo's a little more of a complicated figure than that. But either way, Trump said that he's going to come, to a decision regarding this matter in a matter of hours. And he better hurry up because, as word of this spreads, what's the first thought that people are going to have? They're going to get the hell out of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. They're going to flee over the border as fast as they can. That's why these things need to be a surprise. So now that he's announced it, you either need to put up or shut up right now. Because even if, Trump doesn't go through with it, by making this threat, he's going to force people. He's going to encourage them to leave and to spread this virus across the country. That's he's probably set off a panic to some extent now. Now, if Trump did end up actually, coming out in favor of this and saying, hey, this is what we're going to do, people are talking about that Cuomo might just challenge him in the courts and sue to try and, get some kind of a temporary injunction, and this matter could end up going to the Supreme Court, and there could be some kind of constitutional challenge saying, hey, can the president just essentially, declare martial law and lock people down because, they might be koofing? What my guess is that the founding fathers probably didn't put any provisions in the Constitution allowing the president to make that sort of a broad, declaration, just locking down entire states. So this probably would fail a constitutional challenge if it happened. But, we'll have to see. I don't know. Would a court even grant the injunction? If this is an emergency measure, a temporary injunction would kind of fly in the face of that because, then you would no longer, there would be no emergency. This would be put on hold. So by tomorrow, we will ultimately see, what exactly has happened and whether or not Trump has, decided to lock down the tri-state area or not. If he did, this would be obviously a massive escalation, and all of us who have been concerned about the encroaching, the slow rollout of martial law, will be vindicated. But I must tell you, it's getting confusing to keep track because a couple days ago, I was thinking, hey, Trump's our great hope here because he sounds like he doesn't want martial law. And then now Trump's saying, hey, we might need some martial law in here. And Cuomo sounds like the great hope for avoiding martial law. I don't know how to keep track of this. Some people would probably say that this is coordinated, that this is, just a show for the cameras, and that Cuomo and Trump are on the same side. I don't know. That sounds a little too conspiratorial for me. I don't think that Trump and Cuomo are the kind of guys, who get together in smoke-filled rooms and come to agreements to, achieve each other's ends. That just, I don't think that American politics is that cooperative, especially with a guy like Trump. If it was George W. Bush, maybe that'd be possible. But Trump just seems, so hated. And again, I said that I don't think that Cuomo is a Trump derangement syndrome kind of guy. But to me, if there's any kind of, behind-the-scenes conspiracy to try and roll out this martial law thing and to get the American people to swallow it and make it seem like it's a spontaneous thing when it really was planned, from the beginning back in January perhaps, I don't think that Trump would be the kind of guy who they would let in on that plan. I think that Trump would end up being a pawn in the scheme. I don't think that he'd be a main player. So anyway, with that said, if you're getting anything of value out of this video, I'd appreciate you clicking that like button and sharing this video. And if you haven't already, please do subscribe because I do upload every day and I'd hate to have you miss one. So I'll see you folks back here tomorrow.